What is up, Watch fam? Happy Monday, and welcome to this week's episode of RANT&H. I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and today I've invited a special guest, our own video editor, Anna, to accompany me, and let's talk about a very interesting micro brand.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, before we get into it, a quick wristwatch check. What do you have on your wrist?
I am wearing my UG pole router. It's my only watch. It's yellow gold with a bullseye dial, and it's on a T&H Sark strap from John Rousseau.
That is a very special watch, and I know that when you got that watch, the value was somewhere in like the $800 range. Now something like that would trade definitely over $2,000. So it really is amazing what's happened in the vintage market. And it's not to say it's overpriced. I mean, now they're probably priced where they should be priced.
Oh yeah, I would still pay that much for this watch.
Yeah, I totally agree. I am actually wearing my personal Omega Seamaster that my parents gave to me for 21st birthday. You were there remember when I was getting this watch? We were in Philly and we had
Rolly and I just talked about this.
Did you? Oh.
Yeah, it was going to be listed on the website.
We got pretty bombed that night.
Yeah.
I did. I remember I shared a room in Philly with my dad and my cousin Michael. We got this suite. And my cousin Michael, wonderful guy, but he's got a real knack at night for just drinking and talking forever. And
hours.
I was up real late looking at this watch. Okay, so let's get into a topic that I've talked about on Rant&H and Ask T&H since really kind of day one, basically. The idea of micro brands, micro watches, are they worth investing your money in?
Right.
Why do so many micro brands put out a product? Why is that? How has the micro brand or how has social media like Instagram, but even more so tools like crowdfunding tools,
like
Kickstarter, how have they totally reshapen what is possible for a micro brand, right? I think it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
So I asked you to get a micro brand watch that you thought we could have some serious conversation about. You did all the research, you got the watch, and I'm just gonna give my opinion. So Anna, take it from here. What the hell did you get me?
So this is a watch from the company Baltic. They make vintage-inspired watches. They're a few years old, and they started on Instagram and Kickstarter. They've got a decent following and what seems to be a pretty good reputation, so I wanted to follow up and find out more. So let's do it.
All right, let's go.
So this is their Bicompax Chronograph. It has a steel case and a black gilt dial. So first, let's talk about presentation.
All right, I think that, the matte black box, it's hard to go wrong with. I mean, I don't want to praise a matte black box, but it's nice. This is really interesting. You've got like a cork, of Nautilus-esque box. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense if it was an allusion to the Nautilus because the Nautilus has nothing to do with what I think this watch is going to be, but nonetheless, a very cool cork
I think
top.
the half and half looks really cool.
Yeah, I agree. This is pretty interesting. So the case itself is not the standard cushion on both sides and watch holder in the middle that points up. I think that would have been a little bit not a little bit nicer, but this is still real nice.
It seems kind of like not flimsy, but it's like the watch is kind of shaking in there, and it's a little. I think it's a little small for the. You could have filled it a little more?
You're probably right. Maybe the box is a little bit small. That's interesting. But all in all, I think the presentation is nice. I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
It really puts the focus on the watch because it's the first thing you see, and it almost looks like it's just sitting there on its own. So that's nice.
Okay, so the case is in steel, correct?
Case is in steel, yes.
All right, and we've got some brushed and polished finishing, right? The case itself seems to be brushed with nice grain all around the lugs and the side.
Yeah, that's really nice.
But the bezel itself seems to be polished.
Yes.
For me, I mean, this reminds me of a vintage 1940s chronograph, 1950s chronograph, the kind of stuff that you find, at auctions, or the kind of stuff that you find on Instagram by, usually Italian dealers because they own all of the vintage, chronographs in the world. And the gilt dial is really interesting because that fits in perfectly with that, that era of aesthetic, right? Gilt dials weren't the only dials that were made, at that time, but that time period in watchmaking has become kind of synonymous with this black, glossy gold print.
Yeah, and what I will say is the main inspiration, it seems, for this company is, specifically those like 1940s looks of the stepped case, and just as you said, there are, many varieties from that area for dial, which is why this is one of, I think, 6 options for this watch. But all of their watches do have stepped cases, so that's interesting.
It's funny, like just from a vintage watch perspective, this looks like a watch in theory that I definitely couldn't afford. I don't mean this one, but I mean this reminds me of vintage watches I can't afford, right? This reminds me of vintage watches that cost $10,000-$12,000, and even though you can, in many instances, they become almost like it's like a point of diminishing return. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'd rather have a date, right? But these vintage chronographs that this watch is modeled after are so ridiculously desirable.
So what do you think about the quality of the dial?
It's real interesting. I think they did a pretty damn good job. I don't think it's perfect. I think that, a Rolex, I know it sounds ridiculous, but, a gilt dial by Rolex, a gilt dial, we had a Croton in the past, but many gilt dials are a little bit more, I hate the word like intoxicating. I mean, I find gilt dials to be totally intoxicating. And this doesn't have the same level of gloss. It doesn't have the same pop. And it certainly, in my opinion, doesn't have the same pop as it does on the website. Right, but that being said, because I want to give a harsh review here. That being said, it is a very nice dial. Right. I mean, this is, I would probably say one of the nicest. If you're a vintage watch lover, one of the nicest dials by a micro brand that I've seen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's I love the simplicity. They speak about minimalism on the website, so that's obviously something that they value. I think it's beautifully symmetrical, and I love the use of just the 2 Arabic numerals. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, 12 and 6.
Yeah.
It's real nice. Okay, what's next?
Just a couple notes really quick about the case. It's 38 millimeters in diameter, and actually to me it looks like a 36, but it's a 38. And the water resistance is 5 ATM, which is 5 atmospheres. And just to put that in perspective, that's about 50 meters, which is 165 feet. So it's pretty
50 meters is not water resistant. Which is fine. I mean, I think I've expressed this in the past. I have a personal distaste for all brands, and almost all brands fall into this, that don't disclose what the 5 ATM means. It means you don't expose it to water, right? 5 ATM means nothing. Don't expose it to water is an instruction that should be given, I think. Maybe in a packet, with the watch. That could be one of the disclaimers. History, things like that. Meet our founders. But that should be disclosed.
You can, if you get water on it, if you're doing the dishes and it's nasty, that's fine. But yeah, I wouldn't swim with it.
Swim or shower, or really or I've even heard you wouldn't even keep a watch with 50 meters even in the shower, in the bathroom while you shower, because of all the steam. Yeah, so again, I don't think that's an inappropriate rating. I think that's an entirely appropriate depth rating, truthfully, especially for a chronograph, and for a chronograph at this price point, or a watch at this price point. But I think that it's Baltic's duty to include some sort of a case packet with terms of use or a guidance for use, wind your watch or whatever. But really, much more so, and much more importantly, don't expose it to water basically at all. Yeah, I think that's very important.
Yeah, right. Okay, so let's move on to the movement. This watch is powered by an ST 1901, which is an iteration of the Venus 180. This movement can also be found in ultra-affordable Siegel chronographs for around $300.
Well, they're pretty well known. I think that everyone that's in the watch space that's asked about, hey, what's a value prop chronograph? The go-to answer is the Siegel, right? The Siegel, whatever chronograph. It's a Chinese watch, right? I think it has aviation history as well. I think it's actually a fairly important watch.
Well, that's actually something that they wrote on their website. Okay. Is this Chinese aviation history? I'm actually going to read that from the website. Yeah. So it says, the Venus 175, engineered by Franz Bosch in the 40s, was used in high-end chronograph timepieces. At that time, Venus decided that they wanted to develop a new improved movement, which they called the 180. As they needed to sell their stock to restart production with their new movements, the Venus 175 caliber patent ended to be sold to China for their new Air Force chronograph, which you were just talking about.
Okay, so, I think that Baltic realized this was probably the only reliable, affordable movement, a movement that would make sense, for their business, but they definitely saw a problem with the Chinese movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think they definitely saw, oh wait, this could be a limiting factor. People could be turned off by Chinese history because, whether it's just true or not, the preconception or the notion, particularly in America, at least I can speak to, where Chinese things are cheap and put together to break. Whether or not that's true, I genuinely have no idea, but I am fully aware of that notion, which is a marketing disaster, right?
Right.
So it seems as if Baltic tried to, in this section, show legitimate, supposedly history about this movement. And now it's not just a Chinese movement that's mass-produced. It's a movement with heritage, right? It's a movement, that dates back to the 40s. In France.
Right. Interesting.
Whether the French are better at producing anything than the Chinese, I am skeptical. I can't necessarily say that they're better, but there is no, I don't think there's any negative taste in people's mouth about French production, so it's interesting that they did that. It's actually very interesting that they chose to do that.
Well, so you mentioned, this was an accessible movement, affordable, so then, therefore, how do you justify the, plus $300, compared to something you can get with a Seagull? Well, so this watch comes out to $600, and you can get the same movement in a Seagull chronograph for $300.
Oh.
So in your mind, is it justified?
So you're saying there's a $300 difference between what is basically the same exact two-register chronograph by a different name,
right?
With different design.
Yeah, with different design. So is that design, worthy of $300?
Is the box
and the history of
design,
this brand, which is very new?
It seems like they don't have much history.
Right.
That's really interesting. Once you quantify it, it becomes really difficult, right? Is it worth $300? I don't know. Here's what I will say. I wouldn't buy a Seagull. I just wouldn't. It doesn't interest me very much. It's an affordable chronograph, and that's wonderful, and I would recommend them. But I, as a consumer, as a watch geek, would not buy a Seagull chronograph. I don't think I've ever really mentioned them on the channel. It's something that, on record, I'm not very interested in. It doesn't really inspire me, right?
Right.
But this watch, price aside, is something I am interested in, right? As a fan, as a dedicated fan, to vintage watches. As someone who genuinely not just loves the history, which this doesn't have, but the real aesthetic. I love the design, right?
Right.
I would be much more likely to spend $600 and change or whatever on this than I would for $300 on the Seagull. Again, is the design worth an extra $300? I don't know. I can't speak to that. I really can't. But I would buy this watch. I mean, I would.
So this watch has an open case back, and you've spoken in the past about how important it is to, get people interested in watches, and the mechanism of it, and having an open case back is a huge part of that. So what do you think about this one?
I think that open case backs, even the most simple of mechanisms are very interesting and impressive, right? I think that the fact that a small little machine can tell the time is very, very interesting. Even if that is the most simple, fundamental, rudimentary execution of a wristwatch. I think people can look at it and fall in love with the idea of a mechanical watch. And then they can go up the ladder and find their interests elsewhere, right, into more interesting things. So yes, I think the fact that Baltic has these sapphire casebacks, to me, is a tremendous value prop. And actually, the movement's quite nice.
But what I haven't told you is that it's actually an extra €30 to get an open case back. Do you have any opinion about that?
Do I have any? Yeah, that seems... I don't know why they would offer it without an open case back. It doesn't even make any sense. I guess that's one of those things where they can advertise a slightly lower price and then, tack on things at the end. I don't like that. I really don't.
I think the retail price is without it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is retail price is probably with stainless steel case back.
Yep.
And then they tack on an extra 30. So really the cost of the watch is an extra 30. I don't like that. It bothers me. No, it really does, because I think that if you are so in love with this concept of movements and of what a watch is. And you are the owner of a micro brand. I don't think you would offer it in the regular stainless steel case back when it's so easily available with sapphire. That being said, if that extra $30 it represents a large part of their margin, and including it into the price would have decreased sales. And okay, I mean I can see it. I mean I can see why they would make that decision. But if it's just a demonstration of greed, I'm not all too pleased with that. But I guess we'll never know.
Yeah. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching, and leave a comment below about what you thought about this watch.
And if you love watches and talking about them even close to as how much we do, subscribe to our channel at Theo and Harris, and I will see you all tomorrow.